Okay, so I just finished round one against Sultan Jabir Al Zaruni. So young Emirati player, 1750 already. I think he was like 14 or 15. So, pretty exceptional stuff. But I play d4 and opponent comes in with e6. I play knight f3 and we might get a d4 or a c5 here, but he actually comes and surprises me with the f5, bringing in the Dutch system. This is not something kind of crazy, but after c4 he plays bishop b4. So already this is getting a little bit different. Like usually you play knight f6, bishop e7, but in this case you go bishop b4, and after bishop d2, bishop takes, I actually took with the knight. So this is like very like I don't know any kind of deep theory here, but just traditionally you're going to try and probably take and develop at the same time. But actually the right move here is actually queen takes d2. I think it's a little bit better because the knight is placed better on this c3 square than this d2 square. And the reason is that when the knight's on here on the c3 square, you can actually set up for d5 at some point. But on the d2 square, actually, you block your own kind of attempts at breaking their structure, and so this is probably just a little bit better set up, but something for next time as I take knight bd2. Nothing crazy though. And so now after knight f6, I've got options here. I can go e3, g3, and queen c2, of course. There's loads of ways to set up here. I decided to stick with g3. And after b6, so trying to either go bishop b7 or bishop a6 and start to attack me this way, I play bishop g2, bishop b7, stopping any sort of tricks here. I castle and he castles, and this was played lightning fast. I mean, I'm talking like we are just minutes into this game or less, and bearing in mind this is long form format. So I play rook c1. So here I already think that I'm playing just kind of natural moves, but I don't really have clear cut ideas. I really want this knight to be on this c3 square because it's just easier to play. This is almost in the way a little bit. And he's got complete control over this e4 square. So I couldn't really figure out how to really progress here, because if you start doing something like knight e5, d6 can just kick me out. I can't play e4 because of so much control, and I just couldn't quite see the clear-cut plan. And it turns out actually that one of the ways to progress is knight b1 and then trying to reroute the knight to c3. But here I played rook c1. And after d6, so here this was a little bit off the line, I would say, for black. And the reason is that these light squares become extremely weak, right? So I can at some point threaten d5 and try and make a breakthrough. And after I played here b4, so this was not quite right. So one of the ways to what I'm trying to do here is try and get some queenside space with queen b3, get my rooks into the middle, and try and break through. But what I started to notice was that after something like c5, this is kind of a little bit awkward because bishop d5 is coming in, and again, he's got control over this line. This square is really, really uncomfortable, but I wanted to make something happen. I don't think anything too crazy has happened. To note, the engine really loves d5 here, and this is really tough for me to really kind of comprehend initially, but the idea is the kind of amazing e takes and then knight d4. So open up the bishop, and this is now pinned, so you can't really do anything here. I will get this pawn back eventually, but you're threatening this pawn, you're threatening this pawn, and you open up this line. It's kind of and of course this fork here. So after something like queen here, you take the pawn, and actually what you're effectively saying is, I don't mind giving up a pawn if I'm going to get these squares, and these light squares are going to be really weak. I'm actually okay with that. This, I think, in practice is really quite hard to do. But and one thing to note is that after something like bishop d5, knight d5, you've got queen b3 as well at the end, with this pin on the king and this open line, and actually there's more than enough compensation for the pawn. But I would say it's a little bit tough to see. I decided to play b4, so that's 10 b4, and after queen e7, this is just a simple move. I wanted to play queen b3. And something like a5, I'm going to just set up with a3. But after queen b3, black plays king h8, getting out of this line. There's many moves here where I can actually try and strike immediately. But in reality, I actually played rook fd1. And what you'll kind of start to notice is that I'm a little bit stuck for ideas. I don't know exactly how to progress because after something like c5, I'm worried about this bishop coming and getting a really nice outpost in the middle of the board, and then knight e5, and then g5, g4. And I think when this stuff happens, like I think this can be a little bit difficult to manage. But after rook fd1, and you'll notice that these are all just very easy moves to play for black. It's nothing crazy. And here there was so many ways to kind of think about this, right? So after knight e4, I actually played, because I wanted to keep pieces on, I played knight f1. And the idea was that I wanted to reroute the knight at some point in the future to e3, start to play d5 with open files for my rooks. But I think in reality, I wasn't really sure about this. I think this is just a little bit too slow, and black can just start to develop slowly, and then start to. The big worry is that these are going to start flying in quickly. But after knight f1, black played c5, and again, it's just he really did like kind of attack me from both flanks, and I kept kind of missing these moves. I really thought this wasn't good because of, I had some attacks here where I could open up the file, but actually it just turned out that he could really defend quite well. I decided to take, I believe, yeah. So take, BC, and I played d5. And the idea here was that I would try and use some of these squares, like these weakened lighter squares, try and get my rook on this file, and then maybe try and break through. But this does get quite risky, because actually it's this file can easily become black's, the B file, because after something like, if I'm a little bit slow, so if he plays something like knight a6 and then rook b8, bishop c8, this file just quickly becomes his. And remember, I'm attacking with the queen or the major pieces, and reality, I want to be putting my rooks on these files to attack. So I've got some maneuvering to do as well. But after d5, he plays e5 again. Like there was so many points here when I just didn't think this was going to be played. I thought this was a pretty obvious, like takes here, takes, and actually use this file to your advantage. But what black wanted to do was e5 here and try and push forward, but this was a slight inaccuracy. And what you'll notice is that the computer really wants me to play knight h4. And the reason behind this is that there is a trick here where you take this pawn, rook takes, and then bishop takes, and you've got to kind of protect yourself. And if you do something like g6, which is a very natural move, defend these pawns, defend this knight. After bishop takes, pawn takes, what you'll see is that this pawn is now really, really weak. So you've got nothing to defend this pawn with. So something like knight d2 is going to start to win this pawn, and you can actually start to win material. So then what really happens is that this knight has to move back to either f6 or g5. It actually has to move back to g5, because if you go knight f6, you just take this pawn and you're up a lot of material. So this was a move to kind of block the way. I don't think it's super easy to see moving the knight to the edge of the board, but nonetheless, it was a really nice tactic. But after e5, so that's 15 e5, I played rook b1 to attacking this file, and you'll see this is the first time I'm actually worse in the position. So this is on the 16th move. I'm actually slightly behind. And after bishop c8, I was actually kind of semi-comfortable in this position because I felt like, these pieces are kind of static on the middle of the board. I felt like I had this file, and I thought I could try and break through here, but it wasn't so obvious how I was actually going to break through. But after bishop c8, I played knight fd2 to try and exchange, and with the idea that if something like knight f6 happened, I could try and play e4 as well to try and solidify the position. So like if we have a quick look at that, knight f6 and e4, I was hoping for something like this, but actually the engine thinks that the the push here is actually quite fast and scary, and I don't have enough on this side. So that's actually really interesting. That actually my idea here was probably not the best, and instead black wants the engine wants me to do something like queen c2 and actually prep it on the next move. And if something like e4 actually block the position entirely, so block it all up, and then once this center is all blocked, then go for the open lines, and maybe I've got a good shot there. But after takes, I actually took with the rook here, and the idea was to triple up on the b file and see if I can actually start to gain some momentum. But after knight d7, I actually played a pretty cunning move here. I played queen a4 here, and this is where you can get yourself into trouble as black, because you might want to go knight b6 here, knight b6 and bishop a6 to see if you can attack the pawn. But after knight b6 is a really bad mistake because of rook takes, and this is pinned. So you can't fall for these little tricks, these things, especially when things are kind of obvious. Don't fall for them. But after rook d2, after queen a4, he plays knight f6. So kind of still semi normal moves, but the issue is here he really needs to try and get hold of this b file and or start to break open. If he does nothing, then this is not going to materialize. But after knight f6, I go rook db2, and this is just to get the rooks on the good file. And after f4, which I felt was like probably not the best move, because I think something like e4 is probably better, trying to break through, maybe even start to just really bomb it in the middle. But he plays f4, I played e4 if I'm not mistaken. So the idea here was that if takes, which he did do, I do knight takes, and actually it kind of the whole attack is kind of over. If he does takes, you'll see that actually there's no good squares for the bishop here. The pawns are just too slow, and yes, he's got an open f file, but actually in reality there is no attack here, especially because I'm double defended on this route. I control this square now, and it's actually very comfortable. But in reality, what I was worried about here is something like g5, h5, because this is where I can start to get myself into trouble, because after g5 there is threats of g4 and f3, and actually my bishop is locked in, and I've got no way to improve, and that's what I got quite worried about. But after e4, black actually took, and after knight takes, like I mentioned, I feel really comfortable here. I've got open files, my bishop's on the good line, protecting this square, my knight's protecting kind of weaknesses on c4, while also protecting the key f5 square. So it kind of, just in that one exchange, I suddenly start to feel quite good. But now after knight takes, e3, black played knight g4, trying to put some pressure on this f2 pawn. And here was the crucial moment. There is only one move that kind of maintains a good advantage here, and I found it, which was queen c6. So attacking the rook, it's not over for the rook, because you can defend with this rook by moving this bishop out of the way. But after bishop d7, this is where I had to find the best move. If I missed this and went queen c7 or queen b7, it would have been kind of still pretty equal. I found rook b7, so pinning the bishop and the queen, giving my queen as well. But actually, in reality, this is fine, because after something like bishop takes, I do rook takes, e7, still attacking both pieces. And after knight takes, pawn takes, and let's say something like bishop a4, I go into the middle, and this is actually really a little bit difficult. Actually, this is a bit of a different line, because this is actually open, right? So I think there's even a better setup here, is after bishop e4. Actually, sorry, yes, this is the one. After takes, I can actually take the pawn here, and this is completely over, because what you'll see is I'll get my pawn on c7. This bishop is actually going to be a monster, but crucially, I've got a pass pawn here. So after something like knight takes g2, king takes g2, this is completely over, because you don't have access to any files. I've got the files. And so if you do something like rook ab8, I actually can just do something like takes, And if I actually play, I think I've actually got so many moves here because I can start taking pawns if I want to. I can also play c7, and after something like rook here, I can just start to roll this king in if needed, or simply go rook d7 and rook here for checkmate. But generally, I think there are many ways to win this. I actually saw this and rook here, and I really felt, or bishop here, and I really felt that these rooks on this file is just completely over, because this is going to drop, this is going to drop, this is going to drop, and it gets very messy. So I played queen c7, sorry, rook here, and after he plays queen f6. So this was very much a bluff on his side. I take on d7. Note the 7th rank. I'm actually threatening a check here. And after queen takes f2, king h1, this is completely over. I'm attacking this knight, attacking mate in one, checkmate, and there's no defense. So if you just kind of try and defend, I win a knight. If you try and defend this way, this is just open. If you defend this way, I still win the knight. And if you try and go and checkmate me, this is checkmate directly here. So a pretty tough game. You'll notice that even as late as I think move 19, it is bang equal, and incredibly the game ended on move 25, so just 5 moves later. So it was a really valiant effort, and I can't say it filled me with too much confidence, but we move on. We managed to get the win with some nice tactics in the end. But yeah, it was a really tough game. I think just generally my thought process is that, even from the start, I can be a little bit more aggressive with my d5 moves. I can try and take this. I can in the opening take with the queen and try and get my knight to c3. These passive knights here can get very passive and not so good. And where possible, I should be very wary of these kind of marching pawns. I got fortunate here that black didn't find this idea, but nonetheless, a great start to round 1. And yeah, looking forward to round 2 tomorrow.